How's it going, advanced algebra people? We're going to be taking a look at the quiz for this week from Khan Academy, which is sort of everything we've covered on trig so far. So hopefully this will give you a good idea about what kind of questions you're going to see and how to solve them, so we'll clear some stuff up. Okay, so one type of question you might see is a conversion from radians to degrees. So here we have an angle 5 pi over 12. We want to convert that into degrees. So in order to do this conversion, we just need to know this simple conversion factor. We need to know that pi radians is the same thing as 180 degrees. So if we can set up this conversion ratio, then we can solve for anything. So we're looking for what is 5 pi over 12 radians in terms of degrees. So this will look a little scary because we have this complex fraction here, but we're just setting this up as a simple comparison. Pi is to 180 as what is to x. And we can always set up this problem this way and then solve for that missing x piece. So we're going to go ahead and do our little cross multiplication shortcut. So we get x times pi is equal to 5 pi over 12 times 180. So 5 pi over 12 times 180. All right, so we're going to need to simplify this fraction a little bit, so let's think about it. 180 over 12, does that divide? Don't think so. Oh, yeah, it does nicely. So 180 over 12 is 15. So 180 over 12 is the same thing as 15. So we've got 15 times 5 pi. So we've got 15, 30, 45, 60, 75 pi is equal to x times pi. So we can, if we want x alone, we can just divide that pi out of the way. Both sides have a pi, so those are going to cancel out nicely. And we're left with x is equal to 75 degrees. Great, so we can visualize that a little bit just to make sense of our answer. If pi is 180 degrees, I'll pull up my unit circle here. If pi is halfway around the circle, then it would make sense that 5/12 pi, or about half of pi, is just under 90 degrees. Cool, so we'll go back to Khan and type that in. That was 75 degrees. Great. All right, here's another type of question you might see. This one's asking us to find the exact trigonometric values for cosine of 2/3 pi and sine of 2/3 pi. Now, for this quiz, you probably want to have a unit circle ready to go. You can just Google unit circle and see something like this, and you might actually have your answer kind of presented to you. So if we look on our unit circle and look for that angle 2 pi over 3, again, 2 pi over 3 is an angle measure. It's the same thing as 120 degrees. We can see that right here. And we have our coordinates for the point at 2 pi over 3. So remember, on the unit circle, like we saw in the last videos, the x-coordinate is cosine, and the y-coordinate is sine. So we already have our answers. We can just type those right into Khan. But I want to talk about how we're supposed to solve this problem. Ideally, we have a unit circle in front of us for reference, but that's not always going to be the case. We should be able to reach this conclusion without actually having this reference sheet in front of us. So in order to do that, we need to know these two special triangles, the 45-45-90 triangle and the 30-60-90 triangle. Now, when we are putting these triangles on the unit circle, the hypothesis is always 1, so we're always going to have these ratios. In a 45-45-90, which is represented by all these red points on the unit circle, is always going to have coordinates root 2 over 2 and root 2 over 2. The signs will change depending on if we're going in the positive x direction or the negative x direction, and the y direction as well. We also have the 30-60-90 triangles, which are represented by all the blue points here. So in this example, 2/3 pi is an example of a 30-60-90 triangle. So what I would do here, if I were solving this without a unit circle, I would try and visualize where is 2/3 pi. So pi over 3 is 60 degrees. So I know that 2/3 pi is 120 degrees, or something like this. Okay, and again, we can verify that with our unit circle. So I'm dealing with a 30, 60, 90 triangle. My reference angle here is 60 degrees because we are 60 degrees above the x-axis. Now I know when I'm dealing with a 30, 60, 90, my short leg is 1/2, and because we're going to the left in the negative x direction, it's going to be negative 1/2. My long leg is √3/2. And these are ratios that you really want to memorize, these two special triangles. So there's my answer. X is negative 1/2, so cosine. Y, or the opposite side, is √3/2. So we get the same answers that we saw right here. So let's go ahead and type those into Khan Academy to check. So x direction was negative 1/2. And for sine, we got √3/2. Great. All right. So this one's a little bit different. It says the angle theta is located in quadrant 4, and sine of theta equals negative 13/85. So what's cosine? So this question's a little bit tricky because they want us to kind of go back to our sort of classic trigonometry. So the first thing they tell us is that this is in quadrant 4. So remember that your quadrants are labeled starting here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's telling us we're down here. So I'm just going to draw a triangle, and I don't really know what this angle looks like. I'm just going to make it up though, and it should be a right triangle. So it looks something like this. And what they do tell us is that sine is negative 13/85. So remember, sine is the opposite side over the hypotenuse. So that tells us our hypotenuse is 85, and our opposite side is negative 13. So if I'm trying to figure out what cosine is, I need to know what is this x value. So this is actually a simple question because we're just dealing with a little right triangle Pythagorean theorem. So we're going to say, well, x squared plus negative 13 squared. Doing my best to write with this mouse, it's not. Let's see. Is equal to 85 squared. Okay, so I'm going to pull out my calculator here. So I need to do 85 squared minus 13 squared. It's negative 13 squared, but remember when we square, that negative is going to essentially go away. All right, and so my x, my long leg there, is the square root of that number, which is 84. X is equal to 84. All right, and I just solved this Pythagorean theorem here to get x by itself. Okay, well, if this side is 84, the question was, what is cosine of that angle? So remember, cosine is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. So remember, SOHCAHTOA tells us this will be 84/85. So let's check that. Great. Okay, so this next type of question, it says, which of the coordinates is equal to cosine of 180 degrees? Okay, so 180 degrees is the same thing as pi radians, and it means we're looking on the left direction. So again, I'll pull up my unit circle here. It said we're looking at 180 degrees. So that's straight back here in the negative x direction. So we should be looking at that point right there. Okay, so we're clearly involved with point C here. But we have two choices. Is it the x or the y coordinate? So remember, on the unit circle, like we talked about in my last video, the x coordinate is cosine, the y coordinate is sine. So if we're looking for cosine, that means we want the x coordinate of point C. All right, last type of question here, which is pretty much the same thing here. So let's see if we can do this one without the unit circle. So 2/3 pi. Now, maybe you don't have all your radians values memorized yet, but you should know that pi and 180 degrees are the same thing. So if we're 2/3 of the way to 180 degrees, right, that means we're at 120 degrees. So B is the point we're looking at. And again, it might be helpful to have this nearby until you start to get to know the unit circle pretty well. But anyway, 2/3 pi, we've already seen that angle earlier. We're looking at b here. And they want to know what is the cosine. And I remember that cosine is the x direction, y is the sine is the y direction. So b cosine, we're looking at the x coordinate of b. Cool. So I hope that helped you out to get through this quiz and to take a look at these trig questions. If you have any specific questions after this, be sure to reach out and I'll help you out. Thanks, guys.